All right. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome to Midnight Hatter Live, the weekly variety show where we talk Gundam, gaming, and just getting things done. I am, of course, your host, Steven, aka Midnight Hatter, and joining me, as always, is the Gundam explainer, Adam Blue. How are you doing?
Doing good, doing good. You know what? And something new on my desk here, since I've been excited about it lately, is Phaeton from Exo Squad.
You picked up.
It
Wait,
was
no, that's the
actually in
one
my
you.
attic.
That's
I
the one you had.
That's the one
Wow,
I had. Yeah,
man.
I know. And then so I found a JT Marsh on eBay or
Sweet.
Mercari that I bought, but then the guy never shipped it, so I had to cancel it.
Oh, man.
I know.
I wonder if, back in my, parents' storage unit, the JT Marsh is still there. Now, the thing was is when I was a kid, I didn't appreciate the plug in the back of the neck, so and it was always getting in the way when I was trying to put him
Yeah.
in the suit, so I was like, "I'm just gonna snip this."
Not only that, the thing I did is I bent it like at
Yep.
the base to bend it back because you're right. Like it was a neat idea, but it was kind of awkward to use. That's funny
Yeah.
they had that same experience.
But, yeah, today's show should be a lot of fun. Hopefully, people are gonna get angry at it. It's always fun. Honestly, I'm not sure what drove the decision to make today's topic what it is, but I think that it's going to, we'll you and I are always capable of having much more eloquent and, articulate discussions about these things than you might find
Yes.
over on the app formerly known as the Bird app. But yeah, I am of course repping my new Zeeg New York t-shirt. Shout out to Zeeg New York for
Yep.
the
Awesome
uh,
stuff.
oh man, the Statue of Liberty on there is just too freaking sweet.
I know, it's just great artwork. Like, this is just a cool shirt to have, and I'm sure, people seeing this would be like, "What's that from?" And then it's like, "Well, long story." Sit down.
Yeah, right. And so that'll be interesting the next time I roll up to the build night at Hobbytown and they're like, "Who's this guy?" What's he
Oh, yeah. That's a good idea, wearing it, yeah, at the build night.
exactly. Gotta spread the word around somehow. So
Yeah.
I wish that I had some more exciting Gundam stuff that I had been getting into this week, but it's been kind of a tough work week, so I haven't been able to spend as much time, on various projects and such.
Yeah, and
But
I was trying to I wanted to make a video, for Gundam Explained of me, playing Call of Duty with the skins and all that.
yeah,
Hate technology, I hate technology. Like, I've recorded Call of Duty plenty of times before, but then for some reason, the frames were dropping, and then, like, it was like, "Oh, it's this NVIDIA broadcast," that I did green screen, so it's like, "Okay, then I
yeah,
won't have myself in it." So I was recording without me, but then the HDR was then causing the brightness and the colors to be different in the recording, and I'm like, "Well, let me just turn that off," and then it wasn't working. I So instead, I watched IBO and
hey, well,
posted,
you know what?
which I've been meaning to do.
Yeah,
That
I
was
was gonna
fun.
say that's one that I'm surprised because that was when you first started Gundam Explained, the IBO was just kind of wrapping up, right?
Yeah,
So I'm
mhm,
sure that that was like the number one thing people were asking you at the time was, "Hey,
and
what'd you think
still,
of IBO?"
like, I was all the time, at least once a month, someone's like, "Hey, you gonna cover IBO?" And
Yeah.
then what happened was after, starting Exo Squad, I missed starting a series. I like, "Okay, I'm gonna do IBO." Making that
Yeah.
video was, uh, is most fun I've had lately. I forgot, like, even though I wasn't too crazy about Witch from Mercury, making those videos was a fun thing to do, so,
Yeah. So if you guys haven't checked it out yet, Adam did drop a video covering
yeah,
IBO. Link down in the description.
thanks.
Now, I guess I am gonna throw out a poll to the chat here in the opening stages of today's conversation because I do wanna hear what you guys think, Um, obviously, we're gonna get into, like, opinions and, specific topics around localization, but is there a particular example that you guys know of localization in a Gundam series that, um, you know, is just turns you off? Or maybe it turns you on. Maybe there's something that's good.
And because
Um,
with localization, it's many layers to it, right? There's
yeah,
translating something, but then translating maybe the idea or the
yeah.
pronunciation, because it could be there's multiple pronunciations that are correct. So is it wrong to change pronunciation? There's so much.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
and we're gonna have I have some examples queued up here that we're gonna walk through, and there's some good, bad, and ugly. Some of them, it's maybe just the difference between subbed and dubbed, but what I have found is that, typically the most egregious offenders of, like, heavy localization, and not saying that, good or bad, like, obviously, localization takes place in both dubs and subs, but the dubbed versions typically apply more localization than subbed versions. So,
yeah.
that said, let's just jump right into it because we have a lot to cover today.
Okay, good. Let's do
So, let
it.
me pull up my screen share view here. So, this is the first example that I'd like to cite as far as the limitations of the English language and um, I would say, uh, I don't want to say ignorance of localizers, but it's an opportunity missed, right? Now, I covered this back when I did my
Oh,
first
this
run of Dissecting Gundam
yeah.
series, right? And yes, today we are going to be talking about pronouns, um, but we're not going to be talking about gendered pronouns. So one of the limitations, of course, of the English language is that we don't have formal and informal pronouns. Everything is intonated, right? So, like, for instance, in Spanish, we have different ways of saying you. We have tú, which is like the familiar, like, oh, I know you. We are
Oh, yeah.
intimate. Like, I can say tú. Su, which is the formal, like, if I'm addressing a single person but I don't know them, then I might say su to say you, or son, which would be like you all because it is both formal and informal, but it's meant to address a group of people.
Yeah, the hardest part of Spanish class. Didn't learn a
Right?
thing.
Like the contextual pronoun thing, and it seems like almost every language on earth has these except English.
Yeah. Maybe because, again, it's the most recent, easiest language when it comes to commerce and socialization. Then it just spread, you know? I
Yeah,
mean,
and
is it where you dumb things down and, kinda like when you make a movie for everyone instead of just a core audience? I wondered.
yeah, I think that by limiting the number of pronouns that you have to use, it makes it easier to communicate with anybody, right? Because you're not going to accidentally offend somebody in English because you
Oh,
use the
yeah.
wrong form of you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that even reminds me how in Japan and in German, there's words for concepts that is just not in English. Another
Yeah.
example of that stuff's been more iterated on. Um,
But vice versa, there are things that we have words for in English that maybe there aren't words for in Japanese, and that's where you get that kind of
yep.
funny thing where, like, sometimes, they'll, like, string off a bunch of words in Japanese, and then suddenly they'll say, I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but, like, there's just a random English word thrown in there.
Yeah. Like, I think the funny one is that meme about according to plan, keikaku or something. All
Yes.
according to keikaku, and then keikaku means plan or something.
Right, and so that one is an interesting example, and I didn't want to, I'm glad that you brought that one up because, that was the first thing that I thought of
Yeah.
was, that's one of those examples that people bring up of,
Do you know what it's
kind of
from?
I don't,
Oh, okay, yeah, I don't either.
but, like, yeah, I'm familiar with the meme, obviously, and typically it's used, like, to denigrate people that are critical of localization because it's like, you know, why like, this is what happens when you don't have localizers.
Yeah.
Now that
Death
said.
Note. Death Note, simply new type. Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you, Kyle. See, this is why I should have waited to have this conversation until we could have Kyle back on.
Which
But
we need to do
he's
soon.
he's gonna know exactly what I'm talking about here with this example of, Sayla and Kai. So the first time that we meet Kai Shiden in Mobile Suit Gundam is episode 2, and it's worth noting that there are, like, 17 versions of the word "you" in Japanese. Um, and they all have different meanings. Some of them are designed to be used by certain people, some of them are designed to be used towards certain people, and each of them carries um, you know, their own cultural biases, so to speak. So, in the English version of this scene, we have Kai just says, "Hey, y'all coming with?" And then all of a sudden, Sayla pops out of nowhere and slaps him. And it's like, "Whoa, what's that about?" Like, why is this
Yeah.
and she's really hostile towards him, and you're like, "He was literally just asking if you wanted to get in the elevator. What's the problem here?" Well, the term "you" that, Kai uses when addressing Sayla is "omae," which is it's a type of you that is typically used from young males to young females and typically connotates like a, it's like condescending.
Mm,
If you were to properly localize this into English, then instead of just saying, "Hey, are you guys coming?" It would be something more akin to saying like, "Hey, Toots, you want to get on the elevator?"
yeah.
Because it's that denigrating, like, you
Yeah.
know, putting her down while he's asking a question.
That's interesting because I guess for me, it's still in a way communicated it, but not to this degree to understand it. To me, it seems like, oh, this guy comes off as a jerk. He's ordering people around or telling them what to do. But Sayla is someone that is more nurturing in terms of making sure she gets everyone to safety. And so there was like that conflict there.
Yeah, there's definitely, like, some formal, and then later on, she says, like, "Stop talking to me like some street punk," and
Yeah.
but you don't get that from the English version of him, and it's because he continues to call her, "Oh my, oh my, oh my," over and over, and what's funny is later in the series, he corrects it, and that's when you start to see Sayla and Kai's relationship become more camaraderie,
Yeah.
like, because he starts showing her respect. But that's one of those things that's like, this is relevant to a Japanese audience, but the English audience totally misses it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And not that I guess in my daily life I have been in more situations with, Spanish and Portuguese, and it's kind of the same thing there, as you were saying, like how you're addressing someone. And it's like, "Oh, you
Yeah.
wouldn't say that." And it's like, "But you know what I mean." But it's like,
Right.
still, no.
Oh, man, yeah, I am guilty of that, like, definitely saying the wrong thing for the right reasons.
Yeah,
Um, oh, hey, thank you for the subscription. Appreciate you. Dan Vince in chat says, "FYI, spread of a language to non-native speakers does tend to simplify the grammar. See, for example, the differences between Attic and Koine." I
interesting. You
I'm
know,
gonna have to do some research on that because that sounds relevant to what we're talking about today.
but it's very interesting, and I'll go real quick, it's not super related, but, like,
No, no.
historically, I know in, like, texts, they'll talk about how, like, language was really just for the elite, you know,
Yeah.
and it wasn't like the commoner or the whatever,
It wasn't
and
until
so I
Gutenberg with the printing press, like, you
Oh,
know,
yeah, same thing, that
because
was yeah,
that was
they did
widespread literacy,
yeah, they didn't wanna do that at first, like, because the idea was that sort of knowledge and communication should be contained as to not create what happens or, like, in the English language, we think we're saying the wrong thing and people fight. So, it makes me even think that there would be an elite that maybe has a more easily or not easily, but a more robust communicative vocabulary
for
that
sure.
we don't realize that is being held up at the top or something, and that makes sense because if you're gonna go around, try to assimilate people, you wanna make it easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
not teach
100%.
them the words or the communication ways the elite does so they don't know what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some Gnostic pride going on there,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sure.
I think so, yeah.
So now this is, probably the most egregious offense in my opinion of, like, missing out on an opportunity to do some really good localization, but, let's play devil's advocate for a little bit here. I want to show you guys some examples of localization that is good. So this is from early in Zeta Gundam, episode 5, Father and Son, where this is just after Camille has watched both of his parents get
Oh.
killed. Um, I don't know about your dog, but my dog's freaking out today.
Oh,
Um,
it always is, but luckily, I don't hear
yeah.
yours. Mine's not coming over, yeah.
So this is where that, infamous, like, "Have you heard of a man named Shar Aznable?" line comes into play because Rekkawa and Shar and Emma are trying to comfort Camille and make him feel better. Now, in the subtitled version, what Rekkawa says is shown here on screen. That wasn't too clever, trying raising that subject to try and persuade him, which it's kind of sterile, kind of stiff. But in the dubbed version, what Rekkawa says is that wasn't too clever bringing up Char like that. It only made him more upset. And to me, that is a much more expressive and much more characterizing statement from Rekkawa because, and this has been my sort of criticism of the subtitled versions of Zeta Gundam in general is that Rekkoa doesn't get a lot of good characterization, and it tends to result in a lot of people hating Rekkoa as a character. Don't get me wrong, I still hate her anyway, but
Yeah,
but I do think that she is a rich and well-written character,
I think so
and
too.
I think that the movie trilogy and the dubs actually do her better service than the original series.
Yeah, as almost a character that's not talked about too much. I mean, in Zeta, when she turns, I am upset
Oh, yeah.
because the way she's I like this character, what she's trying to do, how she is, they do a good job of how each character interacts with other characters. So you see how she is with Camille and you almost appreciate that, but then you see her turn. It's like, why did that happen? But
Yeah. Ultronymous here says, "I still hate you, but for different reasons now." It's perfect.
yeah.
Well, and, it's interesting because late in the series, Rekkoa actually goes out of her way to save Katz from Shirako. And it's a
Mm,
moment that isn't covered very often because it's so quick and, I think I forget whether it's Emma or Camille, but one of them is like, "Wait, why did you save Kotz just now?" And then that's it. Like, they don't bring it up ever again. And so when people talk about, like, when Rekkoa turns, like, she's totally irredeemable, it's like, there's still something there.
You know what? I wonder how much of her saying, bringing up Char was a bad idea is her almost, um, there's a word to it, of like
Like,
she likes,
projecting?
yeah, projecting that
Yeah.
she likes Quattro and doesn't like that Quattro is trying to put Char on a pedestal. And that is maybe more of her drive. So by the time she realized, okay, this guy is not who I wanted to be, but Shirako is being a guy, it almost seems like that's really her motivations at the end of the day. Yeah.
See, and I like that, and I really, as far as the dubbed version goes, I really like the specificity that they have there, where it's like, you know, like trying to persuade him isn't as expressive as saying like that made him more upset.
Yeah,
Like, not that
exactly.
you necessarily,
And we don't know what part of that she's referring to that made him upset. Is it just the story or is it the fact he's referencing Shar? So it's because
eh,
Shar has bigger implications, you know.
right.
So
So, in that same conversation, we have another great example of localization between the subbed and dubbed version is that Shar here says, "Oh, you're right, Rekkoa. Regular folks like me have a bad habit of wanting to tell others of all the various people they've met," which is okay. I, I guess regular people do like to share all the people that they've met. But in the dubbed version, he specifically says, "Regular folks like me have a bad habit of name dropping to make themselves sound more important."
hmm,
And I think that even just the term name dropping, that is something that is, I think, unique to the English language.
yeah.
We all are familiar with the concept, but the word itself is something that is an idiom that just doesn't exist in Japanese, right?
And I wanna say that's I could be wrong, but isn't that more of a recent sort of, thing? Maybe not. I just personally growing up, I never really used the term name drop, I guess, until the internet? I
Yeah,
don't
yeah. I was
and
gonna
maybe
say
not.
it
But
it's definitely like an 80s, 90s thing. It
is it
has to
okay.
be. I mean, I don't know the etymology of the word. Like maybe they've been using it longer, but the concept of leeching off of someone else's fame is
Yeah.
definitely something that's, yeah,
Yeah, exactly. That
more
so
recent.
so real quick, with this that you're grabbing, is this from the movies, the show? Do they show the both of them, or do they change things?
Yeah, so, of course, I always go back to my, physical media. This is the Blu-ray of the entire show,
Sweet.
has both English and, subtitled versions on it, and so that's what allowed
Okay.
me to kind of make
Not
these
the not the
comparisons.
movie trilogy. We're not
Not
looking
the
at the movie
movie
because I
trilogy,
wonder how
which
different that could potentially be. Because that was I don't know when that was.
the scene is extended, like,
Yeah,
I
exactly.
in
It's
the movie trilogy, this,
so I'm wondering, like, if they went back to what was the time frame between when they dubbed the Zeta and then they dubbed the trilogy? Maybe 5 or 6 years?
maybe I think that the, trilogy came out in 2010, 2011, something like that.
Oh, is
Um,
the trilogy dubbed? The Zeta trilogy?
no, it's not.
That's okay, that's what I was thinking. Okay, so
But
Yeah,
even so, the scene is still extended
yeah,
and has, like, additional lines of dialogue, which again, I think contribute to Rekoa's characterization because she gets more lines. Like,
cool. Yeah, that's
so
another positive about the trilogy.
yeah, yeah, and, there's definitely positive and negative things to be said about the movie trilogy.
Yeah.
So yeah, another great example of where you can use idioms that are familiar in the language that you're translating to in order to communicate an idea that wasn't clearly communicated in the straight up machine translated text
Which
of the line.
that seems to be like a good call. Like, someone was really thinking about that.
Yes, I think that this is an excellent example of, like, when it's done well, and it even makes the line shorter because, like, you're not having to
Yeah,
elaborate and explain what he's trying to say. You can kind of, like, be more concise, which is
yeah,
awesome.
that is. That's a good one.
Now, a little further on in Zeta, and this is one that I've brought up before, but I haven't gotten to it in the, Dissecting Gundam series, but there's a whole sequence where Haman and Camille are fighting, and they enter into sort of like a new type trance, and they have like these visions of one another. Camille sees Haman and Shar when they were younger, and Haman sees into Camille's mind, and there's like a little bit of that new type melding until Haman cuts it off and starts yelling at him about how he's just as bad as Shar. Um, One of the things that she says is, well, first of all, in the subtitled version, she calls him vulgar, and, so, like, the line goes something to the effect of, like, "How dare you meddle with my mind?" And then she calls him a vulgar boy, almost like that it was, like, a violation, to her,
Okay.
like, sh he a and, I don't think that it's supposed to connotate any kind of like sexual assault, but it is a violation of
Yeah.
her personal being and her body that he's like invading her mind against her will and creating these visions and reminding her of her relationship with Shar. And so, in that same vein of conversation, she calls him vulgar. Now, in the dubbed version, she calls him a hypocrite, which I'm not sure where the context of that comes from.
Unless it's just Camille always seems to be the type to what speak on his ideologies and like but like he's firm on it like and I feel like something like that kind of would almost go against what he's always trying to where he feel Camille always seems to come off like he knows what the right thing is,
Yeah,
when he's wrong sometimes. So I wonder if it's kind of that where she's really just calling him out in general for just being a hypocrite. I
possibly,
don't know.
possibly, and again, there's probably some context here that's being lost, but
Yeah.
in the moment, it's very odd that that's what is said, and then the line goes on, she says, "I cannot forgive you for your insolence," and this is the subtitled version, obviously, but in the dubbed version, she says, "I cannot forgive you for your presumption," which again,
Unless presuming that if he is to violate her with these images, that then she would change her mind.
maybe so,
I don't know.
but, again, it's only changing one word,
Yeah.
like, the line is literally the exact same, "But I cannot forgive you for your," and then it's a different word
And
for that.
what exactly is insolence? Just let's see, just rude, disrespectful behavior. So that's a very general way maybe to go about it.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
being presumptuous could be rude and disrespectful. So yeah, I guess I
yeah,
wonder then, yeah, maybe that context was kind of lost.
exactly. So it's just one of those examples where, like, I think that they probably could have, if they'd taken it a step further, maybe have elaborated on
Yeah.
what they were trying to go for.
Yeah,
Um,
so yeah, even Autonomous is saying, presumption suggests Camille thought he could get away with that new type melding and she disapproved. It just reminds me of X-Men and Star Wars. With the whole mind thing. Like I like how they speak on that stuff. Yeah, and
yeah,
even Kyle saying it comes off as a man prying into a woman's past. Remember, she kind of likes him. Oh,
right.
so that could be a level of it where it's because she has this like of him that it's that kind of thing that happened on the schoolyard when, the
like
guy or the girl, they
pigtail
like each
pulling.
other. Yeah, they kinda mess with each other.
Yeah, and well, and that's what's interesting is that in that same exchange, Haman tells him what a gifted boy he is, which is interesting because it's like, he's gifted, but he's vulgar and he's insolent, but so it's like, well, what are you like? Are we gonna fight? Or are we gonna kiss? um,
Yeah, I love that stuff, by the way. No, but, Kyle's also saying CDA, I think means Char's deleted affair was created from the
yes,
one new type flashback. One image birthed almost 100 chapters of a manga, which
yeah.
I wanna say you just covered that too. Simply new type, yeah, just covered
Yeah,
that.
so
So,
if you guys do wanna see, kind of a exploration, I'm not a big fan of Char's Deleted Affair myself just because I think that it added more context than was necessarily needed, but it
hmm,
does, dive deep into the past between Char and Haman, and so if you feel like, why do they hate each other so much? That's where you should look, so go check out, Simply New Type because his coverage of that was very thorough.
and real quick, I almost feel like Char made a mistake. I can see how Hamon's not Char's type, but he could probably
Here we go. Here we
he
go
can
with waifus.
yeah, he
How
can
how
probably
long
get with her and then control her. Not I'm not saying that in a mean way, but you know how she's just kind of a loose cannon?
Yeah.
It's like she has something she needs to get done, and if it doesn't work, she just then goes all out and it kinda messes things up. That would be a way to kinda hone in on what she's good at without her getting ahead of herself or something. They
Yeah,
would be the
it's
ultimate Xeon team.
oh, easily. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it's interesting how Haman kind of self-sabotaged
yeah,
what was going on in Operation Maelstrom to begin with because, had her alliance with Shirako been a little more firm, then they probably could have crushed the AU, like
yeah. Yeah, she
but
didn't think that through. She
yeah,
wanted
right
to
at the
always have
last
the upper
minute, she was
hand.
like, "Nah, I'm gonna turn on him." Like
Yeah, and it's like she didn't even want to show too much that she is on your side. She had that little tinge of like, "Can you really trust her?"
yeah, exactly. I mean, she is, just throughout Zeta Gundam, like, first she allied herself with the AUG, then she, broke up with them, uh, so, yeah, I mean, she's a very complex character, and so,
Yeah.
I think to that end, it's it bothers me that some of this characterization gets warped or misunderstood on account of things as simple as, like, changing a word around or, like you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I wonder how much there's the left-handed handshake, you know,
Yeah.
that is another level that's going on here that even the localizers wouldn't even realize, "Oh, they're actually showing a more of a social Japanese thing that Americans wouldn't or English speakers wouldn't understand, but they don't know how to translate that. Who knows if that was going on?
Yeah. There are some I would that's a really good, example because I think that with text, obviously, the issue of, like, localizing and translating ideas from words is much easier than translating things such as gestures and visual cues, and there's no way to, like, communicate that without just having, like, a footnote that says, like, "Oh, the reason that she bowed with her left knee down is because she was intending to show disrespect," to like, those are things that,
You can't yeah,
typically
like, if you were to explain Amuro's, the handshake with Camille, like, the reasoning, like, that would be, like, a couple paragraphs maybe on
yeah.
a
Well, and even handshakes in general, like, it's considered rude to shake hands with your left hand because traditionally speaking, when you would greet someone, everyone assumed that everyone was right-handed, and so if you were shaking hands with your left, it meant that you were arming yourself with your right, you would have a dagger or
Mm.
something that
Oh,
you were gonna
that's
pull on, and it's one of the reasons that people don't trust left-handed people, or at least there was, like, a stigma about left-handed people.
wow, I did not know that that was the case, that it
Well,
was based on
yeah.
that. I just always heard there was a distrust, but I didn't know that. That's neat.
So yeah, there's because obviously a left-handed person could shake your hand with the right and still arm themselves and attack you.
Yeah.
It's interesting that like only 30% of people are left-handed or ambidextrous. Like the
That
majority of
seems
people,
high.
it
30? Yeah.
I want to say it was 30. I remember, back in high school, there was a math teacher that she and this one student were constantly arguing about who was more creative, who had contributed most to society, who like I was like, this is kind of inappropriate conversation for a high school kid to be having with a teacher. But they would always come in with like stacks of papers, like, well, did you know that the person who invented this, this, and this was left-handed? Like,
That's true. There's yeah, there's a lot of people. I mean, even my oldest is left-handed, so it's yeah, it's
there you go.
yeah.
That must make him pretty uh uh,
Baseball?
yeah, I was gonna
Yeah,
say as a baseball player, he's got an
exactly.
advantage there.
Yep, that's true.
That's good stuff. Well, to bring it back around
Yeah.
to Gundam, let's take a look at the next example here. This one is one that bothers the heck out of me. So this is, fight between Camille and Shirako, and at one point in the conversation, Camille says like, "Shirako, stop deluding yourself," and in the subtitled version, uh, Shirako says something to the effect of like, "Stop talking nonsense like a smartass," and Camille responds, "Better smart than delusional," which I was like, "Oh, okay, there it's like, I just called you delusional, you called me a smartass. Well, better smart than delusional." That's like it makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, in the dubbed version, Camille says the same thing, "Stop deluding yourself," and Shirako, and this is one of those things where it's like they probably edit it for language because they didn't wanna call him a smartass.
Oh, okay.
And so he says, "I won't be lectured by a child." And Camille responds with probably the dorkiest thing I've ever heard, which is, "Better a child than evil."
While that makes sense, I don't think that would be someone's comeback.
No, no,
Unless you were to pause and be like, "By that I mean a childlike innocence where you don't have the judgments of the everyday life." You know?
right.
Yeah.
And on a further level, I think that it betrays all of the characterization that we've seen of Camille up to this point. Because remember, he is a boy that is obsessed with being perceived as a man. Camille's a man's
Mm,
name. I'm a man. Like, everything to him is about solidifying his manhood. And there's even the line, obviously people, you know, pick on it because of the word autism, but when he's talking to Emma and he's like, "Oh, I can't do anything. I'm just an autistic child." But Emma's reaction to that line is so perfect because she's like, she basically says to the effect of like, you need to stop picking when you wanna identify as a man and when you
yeah.
identify as a boy. She's like, "You choose to call yourself a child when it suits you, but then every other time you're gonna act like you're a man. Like, you don't want us to hit you, but you do wanna be treated like a respected member of this crew." Like,
So I wonder if maybe in a way this could be him reflecting on that, but then using it when he feels it's right. Like this whole time, he doesn't want to be considered a child. He wants to be considered manly. But now that he's met evil, a guy that might think of himself as a man, he sees that there's little value in that. Maybe. Yeah. I don't know.
maybe, that would be a very generous interpretation of what I think is. And what's ironic here is that, like, I understand why they would change Shirako's name because they don't wanna have him swear, but the thing is we already have the term smart aleck, which means the same thing as smartass, but is like the PG version.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, you could have kept the line exactly the same, but swap out ass for aleck and you're done.
Yeah. It's
Like,
interesting.
and then he could still say better smart than delusional. So this is one of those what I would consider like an unnecessary change that is, you know, does it ruin the whole series? No, but it is one of those moments where it changes what the dynamic is going on
Especially in a
between the 2
pivotal moment
characters.
like that.
Yeah, I mean, this is like the climax of the series,
Mhm.
the final, fight between Camille and Shirako, and so, when you look at, like, for instance, Char's counterattack, there's very little difference between the dubbed version and the subbed version of the dialogue between Amuro and Char. Like, the whole "Lala could have been a mother to me," they could have changed that, but they didn't.
Mm.
That line exists in both the sub and the dub. So it's very telling that, like, you know, even when things sound funny, sometimes they need to be left in specifically for that kind of characterization moment.
Like Tetons?
Exactly like Tetons. Um, yeah, I'm not defending all of CCA. So, yeah, I mean, it's, yeah, and I think when you're talking about localization as like a broad subject, obviously everything should be done on a case by case basis. Like
Yeah.
every line should be analyzed to, a pedantic level to say, like, is this something worth changing? And if we change it, does it still convey the same meaning? Sometimes you have an opportunity to convey a meaning better than the original text did.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have something to talk about with freedom, but I don't know if we're gonna get there yet or you wanna
Yeah, we can hop right into that because, yeah,
Okay.
this was the last example that I
Okay.
had kind of queued up for.
Because in that Freedom movie, the dub, and this has to do more with pronunciations. It would be interesting to, I guess, more dissect, like the actual words and terminology, but they pronounce, lacus lacus. And so
Yeah.
that then could go
Thought that's
back
just a
to
Canadian thing.
that's pretty good. No, they could go it could go back to that thing we talk about, like with Tetons, where you know what, there are multiple ways you could pronounce it. But at the same time, this makes me think, okay, does or is someone in Japan that's fluent signing off on the translation? Someone that's like, are they signing off on this? Are they not? Are the people that are doing this just and because I hear a bunch of bad things about like translation, that whole
Yeah.
industry. Like, are they really doing this as cheap as possible? And so they don't really research, and they're just more like, guys, just read the lines, and then they like,
Yeah.
oh, we could hire maybe a Gundam, someone that's been in the Gundam universe, or we'll just hire this person because it's cheaper. They might not know how to pronounce, but we just need to get this done because there's
Yeah.
many, in my opinion, when it comes to like quality control, there are many layers that would have had to have been completely bypassed in order to get those pronunciations like
Oh,
through,
yeah.
especially a movie in a movie theater that is the sequel to. It's the first time really that a sequel to a Gundam property has happened, other than you see within such a wide, you know, like showing that people like this so much that what 20 years later, here's a sequel.
Yeah.
Yet they're pronouncing things incorrectly. So it really makes me think like with some localization, they are just not. Especially when changing voice actors, that's another element because it could be the
Oh,
older
yeah.
voice actors want more money, and they probably deserve it, but it's cheaper to get newer ones, it's cheaper to
Right.
get the
The
let's
old
just
voice acting sweatshop.
yeah, and I hear this stuff a lot, and, same not that Cuckoo's Doan's Island had a bad dub, I actually think it was good, but for that too, it just dropped and was like, "Are they trying?"
Well, and you brought up a very good point because this is something that I think is symptomatic in any film production, not just anime, but like, one of the reasons I can't stand, Batman The Dark Knight is because of there's that line at the end when he and Joker are staring at each other face to face, and he's like, people are ready to believe in good. And I'm like, okay, let me get this straight. Someone wrote that, someone proofread that. S Christian Bale had to say that,
And how many
uh,
takes, potentially?
multiple takes. Heath Ledger had to have that spittle in his face for however many times that he said that line,
Yeah.
and it's like, at no point, not the editor, not Christopher Nolan, not anybody involved with the making of this movie thought, "That kinda sounds dumb."
I think it's the George Lucas thing where no one will say no
Right, no one's gonna
to
tell Christopher
yeah.
Nolan that, like, because
I'm
yeah,
pretty
I
sure
mean,
that's
look at Interstellar, like, that's a movie that I think Interstellar had a great, premise, but,
yeah.
oh, man.
No, that's the thing with, yeah, Christopher Nolan movies, like, the production value on them are insane, amazing. But then when you start dissecting, like, the moment to moment, sometimes dialogue doesn't make sense or what the characters are doing, but
Yeah,
yeah.
he's definitely, an egomaniacal, um,
Well,
creator.
I think that's why Oppenheimer did well because he was mainly basing it off of some things and telling a specific story, whereas you get stuff like Interstellar, Batman, and, that other movie he did I totally forgot about with, Denzel Washington's
Tenet?
son. Huh? Tenet.
Was it Tenet? Yeah.
Well, Tenet was bonkers, didn't make sense. It was cool
Oh,
looking,
yeah.
but it wasn't a thing.
Well, even Inception, like, my big criticism of Inception is turning Leo DiCaprio into, like, Basil Exposition, where it's like he
Oh,
had, like, the info dump character that's like, okay, let me explain to you because you're the new character that's like a stand-in for the audience. Let me explain to you, the audience, how all of this works and what the rules are for being in dreams. And like, well, once you go down 3 levels of dreams, that's when you're in limbo. And it's like, well, why 3 and not 5? What you know, like
And not only that, but going further, in the movie, they weren't necessarily following their own rules. So
yeah,
there's times where something was happening, I'm like, "Well, you guys could just do this." But
right.
then they wouldn't. They'd be like,
There's
"Oh,
like
we can't
plot
do anything."
contrivances.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, you're right. So it's sometimes when that happens when things are pieced together. Um,
But so but to your point, like, these are massive productions with tons of staff, and so a lot of these lines, a lot of this dialogue, a lot of these moments and these characterization, expressive, uh, scenes have to go through lots and lots of different people signing off on them. And so
yeah,
at what point, like, who do you blame for letting something like Lacuse slip through the cracks?
I
And
know.
not just once, but then it's like 20 years later, we're still saying it.
Yeah, uh, yeah, I wonder, it's just whoever is paying the bills, is the one like, I don't wanna pay a lot, so yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, but I would think Sunrise would be a little more protective. But again, sometimes I go back to, like, how much does Bandai really care about Gundam outside of Gunpla in the West? It kinda sometimes seems like, you know, they don't, but
And it's funny you mentioned that because I, had a back and forth with, Zionic Scans on Twitter, talking about, Gundam in terms of, like, series that saved Gundam, right? Like, everybody credits Seed as, like, saving Gundam, and I was
Mhm.
like, I don't think that Gundam was ever a property that needed saving, s you know? Um, 'cause, the point that Zeonic Scans was trying to make is that, like, G Gundam deserves more credit for saving Gundam the first time, and I was like, I don't think that it really needed saving. I think that G Gundam definitely created a generation of fans, obviously, but
Oh,
that
yeah.
was it conveniently happened at the same time that Bandai acquired Sunrise. But that was already in the works prior to Tomino doing, Victory Gundam, and
Oh,
it was
okay.
due to the low Gunpla sales.
Ah, okay.
So, it's interesting how, like, Bandai's management of the property has really been about how can we merchandise this and, like,
Yeah,
story.
eh, which is very interesting because I think, and a lot of, media companies now know that you have to kinda, like, be everywhere, and so
Mhm.
maybe it is taking Bandai a while to figure that out. I mean, just look at how, like, with Fallout, that show that came out and did well, and then the game started selling like crazy. Where's the merchandise? I mean, there is merchandise, but it's not like the Fallout, Microsoft is pretty much the owners of that, or it's not like,
Right.
"Okay, we have all this Fallout plastic to sell." They're banking on the fact that they had a good show and a good game.
And what's interesting is that the game itself, you remember when, was it Fallout 4 came out when they were giving or they were selling, like, the $500 Pip
Oh,
Boys, like,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
and that's for a game.
yeah.
I think that if the $500 Pip Boy came out now after the show, you'd get a lot more people pouncing on it.
Yeah, yeah, it is very interesting because I even wonder, just thinking with the younger generation, like, you have to have quality stuff that's not, um the Gunpla, because there are younger kids right now that do not care about buying plastic things. It's all about what
Yeah.
can I interface with digitally with my friends.
Which is funny because that's, like, so much less overhead, it's
It
cheaper to
is.
distribute, like,
It
you know,
is. Yeah.
creating digital content for a younger audience seems not only more profitable, but also less expensive to produce, so
Yeah, and I think again it goes to what we were talking about before, where there's executives that are higher up and they're able to. No one's going to say no to them, and it's
right.
probably the old school. We're just banking on this plastic, so we just need to worry about that, and not put money into anything else. Like, I don't know if they paid for the Call of Duty skins, but it would make more sense to put that in Fortnite, because don't you want to capture that young audience that, and that's a good way to determine, okay, is the future digital for Gundam? Maybe Gunpla will just slowly, even though it's at a high, actually it's not at a high. It was at a high. Now it's back to the levels it was before.
You're right, we're at pre-pandemic
Yeah.
Gunpla levels.
So that should That's interesting. I never really thought about that as much. A lot of the video game in Hollywood right now, video game industry in Hollywood are having issues, and a lot of that has to do with thinking during the pandemic, "Oh, this is how things are." And now I think Bandai has realized that actually because we saw that I think we covered it in one of the episodes where the spike was up during the pandemic and then Gunpla sales went all the way back down.
Yeah.
So that was almost like more of a deceiving factor of
Yeah.
the popularity. Yeah,
And you always have to address those kinds of externalities that might be driving numbers one way or the other. And sometimes it's bad. Like, it's
yeah.
like, well, nobody watched this anime. And it's like, well, it was like the pandemic had just ended. Everyone was going out, like there are
Yeah.
so many of those little factors that you need to apply when considering business decisions. And, so Jam Kalex says here, "It depends who's in charge. Kamen Rider was making big strides, then corporate dumped the current head of Western markets in the seat to get him out of the way, and it's been rough ever since." So, that's a good example. Sometimes having someone who's not a yes man, someone who is probably difficult to work with for upper management, and they're like, "We gotta get this guy out of here because he's causing nothing
Mhm.
but headaches." But maybe those headaches are actually creating the revenue that you're
Yeah,
that you're experiencing. Um,
that's a good point.
so yeah, and I think that you're very astute to point out, like, the sort of corporate culture and the egos that are involved because, sometimes a bad idea gets propped up by someone that just maybe just
And
someone in the right seat, right?
yeah,
Right place, wrong time. And and judging from the price point of those Call of Duty skins, I am inclined to believe that Bandai paid to have them in there because if they were doing it as a promotional thing to try and promote the appeal of Gundam to a new audience, then wouldn't they make them more affordable, like $5 a skin instead of 20?
yeah, that's true.
To
That's
me,
true.
it seems like they're trying to make their money back on the purchase of those skins.
Yeah. Yeah, that is true.
And that's totally speculative, like, I'm not sitting in on these board meetings, so
Yeah.
I don't you know, but you have to when you are trying to deduce the motives of a decision.
Yeah, it's very interesting, because, then this goes back to, that movie we're waiting for, that live action movie that we're waiting for,
Yeah.
and that would be neat too because there's gonna be some localization going on there, but it's gonna be from the ground up. I wonder how many things that we would see in Gundam they wouldn't even touch on, or they would go about a different way just because it's like, well, in Western culture, this would actually happen. People wouldn't be slapping anybody in the future. So it could be that they remove that and that takes away an essence of it. I don't know. Like, do you
Yeah.
leave in the slap and then everyone claps in the movie theater when there's the first slap?
I mean, you definitely have those kind of fan service moments coming out of Hollywood from time to time,
Yeah.
like in the 3rd X-Men movie when the Juggernaut's like, "I'm the Juggernaut, bitch," and it's like, "Oh, hey, he said the thing from the meme," and like, yeah.
And yeah, and did you know that Jordan Vogt Roberts' King Kong Skull Island has still made more money than any other Godzilla or Kong movie, like in that legendary universe?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting. They still make good money, but they
Yeah.
haven't topped Kong Skull Island, so that's actually pretty neat.
That's promising to hear for
Yeah.
sure. Um, and yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of good reasons and bad reasons for, localization changes or just adaptations from things. One example I can think of is there was a series of movies that came out based on the book Night Watch, which if you
Oh,
haven't read it, awesome book, awesome like book series. It's
yeah,
you
Night
know,
Watch, like Day Watch, and then
yeah,
something
Night
else. Yeah,
Watch, Day Watch, and Twilight Watch is the third
Twilight. Well,
one.
I don't. How did I know you were going to say all this?
I don't know. This is crazy.
I
Did
know
you
it's
read
you were
the
talking.
book
It's like, oh, he's
series?
going to talk about the Day Watch series, and then is the
Yeah.
last one called Twilight Watch? Yeah.
So, famous example of changing something from the book to the movie for a stupid reason. So in the book, they refer to and again, if you guys haven't seen the movies or read the books, check them out. It's a Russian author. It's like a fantasy series, but like set in contemporary times. There's
And I
like
think
vampires and werewolves and
the
all kinds
movies
of
are
cool
even
stuff.
Russian made
Yes,
too,
yeah.
which is pretty cool. Yeah,
But
different
they
culture.
did come
Yeah,
out with dubbed versions.
yeah.
So and I don't know what your feelings are about watching dubbed live action movies. Like,
I I think I prefer it. Again, like,
yeah,
Jackie Chan movies are the biggest example. You
yeah,
know,
Rumble
like,
in the Bronx and like this.
because when Jackie Chan does the voiceover, like, I
Oh,
love
that's even
that.
better. Yeah,
Yes. When I watch the Jackie Chan movie and he's not doing the voice, I'll go research, okay, is there a version where he's doing it or not? Because 'Cause they've done that where they've
go
re-released.
back and
Yeah,
yeah,
like Twin Dragons, excellent Jackie Chan movie where there's twins of him. I mean, that's awesome. Anyway,
so
originally
awesome.
it was dubbed with a different actor, then they went back, released it in theaters with him dubbing.
And he's such a good sport. Like he's willing to go back and do that stuff,
Yeah, I know,
probably for peanuts.
I know.
But, yeah, so that Night Watch book, in the book, there's, like, kind of a sub-layer of existence that's called the Twilight, and it's like, these others, the people that are magically imbued, have the ability to pass between the real world and the Twilight world, and, they become ethereal and have all these special powers and whatnot. However, at the time that the movie was coming out, you had not only the Twilight book series, but you also had the Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess video game had been out for a couple of years. And so what you have is you have conflation in the market about what the word Twilight means.
Oh, yeah.
And so in the movies, they call it the gloom. And
Oh,
it's like, oh, we go in and out
yeah.
of the gloom.
Wow, I didn't
Because
know. I
they didn't wanna sound like they'd ripped something off. Now, ironically, fast forward to 2023, 2024, we have a Legend of Zelda series that calls their bad guys Gloom. It like, in Tears of the
th
Kingdom, you've
that
got the
is
Gloom
weird.
hands, you've got the Gloom this, Gloom that. So, it's funny how things turn around like that.
Yeah, that's yeah, that might not be coincidence. What if there's people that were familiar with all this and they happen to be working in the same I don't know. That's
I mean, I like to imagine that most people that are, kind of in creative roles typically are as geeky as you and I and would make these kind
yeah,
of connections. But yeah,
exactly.
I mean, it seems like what a strange arbitrary change for not it has nothing to do with like any kind of localization errors, has nothing to do with any kind of like translation. It's just we don't want to be we don't want to be associated with these other franchises that also use this word.
And I wonder if that was at the height of marketing on the internet where it's all about the SEO first and foremost.
Yeah, that's true.
I
I
wonder
gotta cash in on those
'cause
keyword, searches.
lately it seems like people don't care because a lot of companies are named things that are just spelled incorrectly anyway, like so yeah,
That's true.
yeah.
So, yeah, it's interesting how these sorts of decisions get made, and this, again, goes beyond localization. This is, talking about marketing and production decisions that get made for crazy reasons.
With so many people involved,
Yeah.
which anyone could say, "Hey, what about this?" or "Hey, what about that?" But sometimes things just go through the cracks. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's wild. So, yeah, my opinion of localization hasn't changed, but I thought that it was interesting to look at it from a Gundam standpoint because I know a lot of people, when they're arguing about localization, they're usually talking about like visual novels and, you know,
Yeah.
like manga. So, but, it's something that has been going on for as long as there's been media that's translated from one language to another. So it's not like and it's
Yeah.
not inherently bad, not inherently good. It just needs to be handled in respectful
And
and
we're at a time now where we can have these discussions, like think of long ago when Solon went to Egypt to get some information, then went back to Greece, I think is where he's from. And very little you can really do to make sure everything is correct. You don't have all these people that can kind of source, like,
can you just imagine the Greek citizen that was like, "Huh, I'm not sure that he used the correct form of you when he was addressing"
yeah,
like
exactly.
oh my
It,
gosh.
and Kyle's saying Jackie Chan plays Shang in the Chinese dub of Mulan, which is pretty cool because I
Yeah.
just learned that he also dubbed the Beast in Beauty and the Beast for
See,
the
I mean,
the Mandarin version. Yeah,
the hardest working man in what's the equivalent of Hollywood in China, of Chinese Hollywood?
yeah. What do they call that? Hong Kong cinema, maybe.
Yeah,
I don't
we'll
know
have
if they're
to
Yeah, there is a Golden Harvest. No, that's a production company, but they, like, made everything. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, what do you think, Adam? Do you what are your feelings about
About
localization, about
I feel like it's not taken as seriously as it should be because we're this is these storytelling is a communication of ideas, and sometimes these ideas, especially in Gundam, it's more about, I feel like, and you kind of help me understand this, like, why do I care if a movie has these or show has these themes that have to do with real life? Well, it's kind of teaching us things that could happen, and maybe we think about that in the future. We don't want to make mistakes of the past. A TV show that's a cartoon could show people making mistakes that in real life you shouldn't either. So I think it's
very true.
important that localization is taken as seriously as possible, and it can be done. My example of that is the Souls series. For as obtuse as the
There you go.
ideas that need to be communicated to the player, that localization is so on point to convey that sort of uh, almost nothingness, but there's something there, you
And
know?
how much do you think is that down to the gameplay itself? Because the gameplay is communicating those messages and those themes to the player just as much as the dialogue and the
That's
story
right.
is.
Yeah, and I
So,
think that's a big part of it, which
and maybe
is
that's why gaming media is as transcendent of cultures as it is.
and what do you mean by that?
Like, it's easier to adapt a game from one language to another, one culture to another than it is to do, like, a movie or a
Oh,
book
I see.
because the ideas that you're trying to communicate are done in, um it's done as part of the mechanics. I don't wanna go off on too much of a tangent here, but, the creator of Oddworld, like
Yeah,
Abe's Odyssey, he talked about
Lorne Lanning?
yeah,
Lorne Lanning, yeah.
yeah. He did an interview where he was talking about, like, the motivations behind why Abe used his voice as he was like, "If you give the player a gun, then they're gonna solve every problem that they're faced with a gun. But if you give the player all they can do is talk to other slaves, then
Yeah,
all of a sudden, their problem solving abilities have to be evolved around nonviolence, around decisions about sacrifice and morality. And so he's like teaching all these complex themes, but there's hardly any words in the game.
that's a good example. That is a really good example. Um, hmm, yeah, so it's important. It's very important that I think this stuff is taken more seriously, and I am disappointed with how it seems to be with Gundam lately, to a degree. Although, again, I not as familiar with anime as most people are, so it could just be this is just the way it is, unfortunately. I don't know.
Yeah, but I think that that's why it's important for people like you and I to raise awareness on this stuff in a way that isn't just condemning the actions of people and saying like, "Well,
Right.
you don't deserve to have a job," and stuff like that. Like, I don't think that that's productive.
Exactly. It's
But
like, what are
like you
steps you
said,
can take?
yeah, what are steps you can take to be more respectful to the source material and really convey these messages? Because you know, like you said, it can be hard to communicate messages using real life examples, and so sometimes fictional media is necessary in order to make people understand one another.
Yeah, that's that's right. Very good.
On that note, this is why new type theory is so important.
I didn't want to say anything else after that.
Exactly. But yeah, on that note, we are gonna wrap up for today. Like I said, if you have not, checked out Adam's, review of IBO,
Oh
definitely
yeah.
go take a look at that because, yeah, it's like
Wait, did you watch?
finally.
Did you watch it?
I haven't yet, so that's what I'm gonna do
Oh,
immediately
cool.
following this. Maybe I should host a watch along.
No, that's cool. Yeah, because I'm curious what you think of IBO. Again, I just got through the first episode, but yeah, curious.
Sweet. Well, yeah, like I said, guys, go give that a check, and, yep, of course, the Gundam Explained show tomorrow, 5 PM Eastern, 4 Central,
Yep,
so
yep.
stay tuned for that. Until then, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and we will see you tomorrow.
See y'all.
Cheers.